Hello everyone. In this video, I'm speaking about Uranus stationing direct, which will happen here in the US, in the West Coast, on Tuesday morning, tomorrow morning. Before I speak about this transit, I want to offer an important insight. The movement of any planet going direct can be further understood by thinking about it in terms of where is it going. When a planet begins moving direct, it's going to be moving full on to a particular part of the zodiac, at which point it will begin moving retrograde. Right? Before moving direct, it was in a different phase. It slows down, turns direction, now it's beginning to go direct. And it's going direct towards somewhere. It's like getting in a car. Yeah, the kind of car, where you are when you're getting in the car, all of that is useful. But it's also useful to think about it in terms of where is that car going? And we can very tangibly track that. To understand that Uranus is now moving direct, but that there are certain things that are going to be manifesting, says we're now beginning a journey relative to those certain things that are going to be manifesting during this Uranus direct. So the flavor of it, the awakening of that is really awake in the consciousness, in the collective, as this planet begins to move direct. So let's start off this talk by looking at this entire direct cycle, basically from January 2022 until August 2022, when it will next go retrograde. I've put Uranus on the ascendant. So here it goes direct. The stationing right here in black is stationing direct on January 18th. And let's progress it month by month. Keep your eye on the North Node Uranus relationship. Uranus is moving forward through the zodiac. Of course, the North Node is moving backwards. And they are progressively meeting each other. By April, they are less than 10 degrees. So just a few months from now. They get closer and closer. By June, they are just almost 3 degrees, actually. 3.5. By July, they are a degree and a half. And they meet each other in August. Actually, the exact date where the North Node Uranus conjunction is, I think, July 31st. So I'll just show you that date. Here we go. Sometime on the 31st of July in the US, they meet each other. Interesting, Mars is also there, so that's pretty powerful. And then after that point, keep on following, Uranus passes the North Node, begins moving retrograde in August, but stays really close to the North Node. It enters a new phase in August, it goes retrograde. Right, so clearly August is an important turning point, right? Uranus crosses the North Node into a new phase and turns retrograde. And it stays in a new phase, right? It doesn't actually cross back over the North Node again, but throughout the rest of the year, or already into January 31st, 2023, Uranus is just 6 degrees away from the North Node. Basically, in March, Uranus finally begins to separate significantly enough from the North Node. You're 16 degrees, North Node at 4 degrees. So there's a good year of Uranus and the North Node being conjunct. They enter orb around April this year, and they'll be really close to each other throughout all of this year, and then begin to separate more significantly in 2023. This is useful to note. When we're really tuning into the movement of Uranus moving direct, I would say we're moving direct towards the North Node, and this has a lot of important evolutionary significance. Okay, so I'll speak to the North Node connection in a moment. Whenever we're in a strong Uranian time, which we are now and will be this whole year, there's a tension between the world we've known, how we've done things, and the pushing forward of a new way of thinking. This new way of thinking is always something that will be grasped by a small majority of people, and after a lot of resistance and pushback will be integrated amongst a majority. Individually, it's grasped within some part of our consciousness that is freed up, that remains as the observer, as the witness. but we were resisted and pushed back by the rest of our consciousness that is afraid of change. And eventually it's incorporated and included and integrated. We see this happen on an individual and personal level all the time, right? Whenever something new is emerging, it always feels a little scary, and there can be a lot of anxiety because we're trying to make things go the way that we've known it to go. We'll often feel either it's not working as well, it's stressful, we're not flourishing, we're not feeling connection, or there's just this sense of divine discontent. I want to give 2 examples of this that I think are pretty much in the collective right now. You know, we may have heard of the idea of the internet 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. Internet 1.0 is, like you have a website, you have an address, you buy that domain name, people visit your website, maybe they can click to go to other sites, they can consume information, they can email you, they can buy something. That's the first version of the internet. There wasn't a lot of community, right? Maybe we had, chat rooms, like AOL chat rooms, but that was the extent of it. Not much more than that. Then we have 2.0, which is social media. Right now, the internet world is basically the social media world. You're not just interacting through email, you're really connecting with each other through these platforms that host the possibility of community connection, right? This started with Friendster or Tribe.net, and it's evolved. They have Facebook and things like that. Right now, Facebook itself is just sort of, there are other ways that are really becoming very popular beyond Facebook, which is really cool. And what's happening with the social media, with the internet 2.0, is there's a whole paradigm change. Marshall McLuhan spoke that the medium is the message. Living in a world where we have things like social media, that completely changes the game, right? How we live as human beings is defined entirely by the paradigm. No one can imagine a world right now without these smartphones where we can access and communicate with each other effortlessly, anywhere, anytime almost. And then prior to this time, once we had the internet and that was well integrated, no one could really imagine a life without email. But, 1989, 1990, 1991, 1992, before email was introduced to the collective, no one could have imagined what life was like, what life would be like with email, right? And then you're in it and you don't realize how all-consuming, how all-encompassing reality became. It's like you go to drive. Now we all have smartphones, not all have, most of us have smartphones that will tell us where to go. The medium is a message. There's a culture of driving and interaction and information and relating to life. We relate and see roads differently because of the technologies that are fully integrated in our lives. Before that, we used maps. When we used maps, we had a different way of relating. We thought of the road differently. We saw the road differently. We related. We have different formations of thoughts were created. Different neural pathways were formed. Completely unlike the neural pathways that are formed now. So at every technological advance, there's a complete paradigm shift that no one realizes they're in. You don't realize you're in the water when you're in the water until you get out of the water and you can reflect back on it. You just become totally engrossed by the environment. It takes that Uranian kind of personality to step outside of things, to look at it in a sort of observer way. As the observer, we can say, oh, I see the pattern here. I'm standing on top of the mountain. I'm looking down at humanity. I see the trend, how we're living. But this is just a phase. What else is going to happen? So the example that I want to give that's a part of the 2.0 paradigm, in my thinking, the 2.0 paradigm is also corporate interests, because what happens with the social media world, an immense amount of data and information and creative content can be shared freely with lots and lots and lots of people. So we also have things like Spotify and YouTube where sharing can happen and community can be, you can reach community in all kinds of ways by sharing data or information. But it's centralized according to corporations, right? They're creating the platform, and the masses are joining these platforms to share all of this data. All right, you're listening to this on YouTube. I have an album. My album's on Spotify. Most people who listen to my album probably listen to it on Spotify. Now, here's the interesting thing. Every paradigm has its own set of rules, and the majority of people will just adopt to it. But then it's going to evolve, and it's going to go through that same process of pushback, integration, and then final total integration in the consensus reality. And then a new phase. So right now, to use music as an example, in the 80s, in the 90s even in the thousands, if you wanted to buy music, if you wanted to listen to music, you would buy it. That began changing with Napster, where you can download, and then people began downloading music for free. But it used to be that you would buy it, which means if you were an artist and you wanted to make money, you would find ways to sell your album, be it in stores or even online. Now that's not a reality. If you're a musical artist, you're not going to make money selling an album because people can get it for free, right? If you're really, really popular on Spotify, you might get some money, right? If you're really, really popular on YouTube, you might make some money, but mostly because of advertisements, right? Or maybe other things that you're selling via the exposure you're getting for your music. The corporations that are hosting your content, they're the ones that are primarily benefiting from all of this. This is a part of the 2.0 world. If you want to listen to music without advertisements, you have to pay Spotify to listen without advertisements, right? So that's the world we live in, and that's kind of just how it is. If you take that Uranian perspective, we're going to find people that are just like, ooh, that's so annoying. I don't like this, and I just don't want to get involved. There are always going to be people who are going to not get involved. I'm not going to listen to Spotify. I'm not going to put my music on Spotify. For many years, I just felt disgusted by Spotify, the whole idea of it, right? Giving me commercials so I can listen to music. And that my friends who created music weren't really benefiting from it much. But then when I made an album, I made the choice to join Spotify because I cared more about making my music available than me gaining profit off of it. I just want my music to be shared. So I joined eventually. So we have that, those that will just not want to be a part of the system, but these people also tend to not be very involved, right? They're harder to find, they're harder to interact with. Then we have people that are maybe in the system, but they're not loving it. They know it's not the end game, and they're going to be working to evolving the status quo, right? And so these people are going to be thinking more consciously. How can we evolve? Now, when we evolve with Uranus, the essential direction that we always go is in alignment with the intelligence of creation, which is not about corporate interest. It's not about exclusion. There's a principle of harmony and resonance and inclusion embedded in life, because the mind of creator is that. And so all greater evolutionary processes, while we will often see them co-opted by special interests, the trajectory of evolutionary process is always at the core of it towards one of greater inclusion, which means greater conscientiousness around how is this impacting us socially? How is this impacting our mental health? How is this impacting our basic survival needs? How is this impacting underprivileged communities? How is this impacting the environment? The more we think about our own evolutionary developments with greater consideration to everything in all of it, all of us, all of it, right? All of life, all of existence, the more resonant and aligned these technological and creative developments will be. The more aligned they will be with the actual intelligence of creation itself. And so we have the Internet 3.0, which many people are speaking about now. And I was listening to a talk that was speaking about this as 3.0 will involve the blockchain. And what's really interesting about the blockchain is it's decentralized, which means you can share information, you can be a part of community, but not have to do it through a centralized source that's going to control and own your information or sell all of your information for their own profit. That means we're going to begin finding a way of sharing and celebrating one another, supporting one another, building community in a way where we're not supporting corporate interests, but we're actually learning how to support one another. So for example, with music, you can sell music on the blockchain, and there are all these ways of thinking about it that are beyond my capacity to think. I know NFTs are a big part of that, but this is what's beginning to emerge right now. For people like myself and most of us, this is very hard to understand. It's just sort of, I'm interested. It's like, ooh, I love the idea of decentralized internet. That feels really good. I love thinking about what's beginning to emerge in the financial realm, how cryptocurrencies as well and blockchain technologies are a way of evolving beyond centralized forms of monetary exchange and creative commerce exchange. So this is what happens with Uranus. And it's not easy to understand for most people at first, but then it becomes more and more integrated, and it becomes the culture and the life that you're living in, and you forget about it. You forget that it's how you're living. Something that happens with Uranus, though, is it becomes quicker and quicker, almost exponential. Let me give an example of that. We went thousands of years with no electricity. Electricity was discovered or invented, put to use. We've had several developmental innovations, like from DC electricity to AC, and then telephones, radio, which is a part of the AC technology that Tesla invented. And that, evolved into internet. All of that happened in the schematic of human history in a very short time, right? And then it's like from internet 1.0, 2.0 to 3.0, there's an exponential growth that's occurring to get to the point where we're talking right now, we're having this conversation. Well, I'm sharing and you can comment, right? And I have this camera, this computer, this internet, and this smartphone, where 50 years ago, none of this existed, but we had the telephone, right? So there's an exponential process of growth that occurs. To the part of us that resists growth, that's afraid of change, that can feel terrifying and scary because so many things can be changing so quickly, and we can look into the future and feel like, how do I deal with that? How do I grasp that? That feels overwhelming to me. And we can really resist it and create a lot of fear and anxiety. If we're meeting this time, especially with Uranus squaring Mercury, with a lot of anxiety, it means we're fighting the signals. We're fighting the natural unfolding of evolutionary development. It's a great time to just literally, metaphorically climb a mountain, take a step back, look without preconceptions, to try to find some state of relaxation and openness to actually see the evolutionary potential right now. At the same time, there can be a part of us that feels very excited. Like, oh, this is really exciting. There's something new emerging. When a planet joins a north node, a prominent feature is that planetary function becomes essential to the ongoing evolutionary development at that time. It doesn't mean it's easy, it means it's essential. So this is a Uranian year, especially over the next few months as it gets closer to the north node. For the majority of the year, it's going to be getting closer and closer and really emphasizing that this Uranian process of evolution, of upgrading and accelerating our own growth collectively and individually, is a big part of it. So here's the invitation. Here's the meditation and reflection for Uranus stationing direct. What's not working? Right? Even if it was very evolutionary and new last year, there's an acceleration occurring. What's not working? What's not flowing very easily? Right? It's like trying to teach a class using AOL, or having a community discussion on an AOL chat room. Chat rooms were from the 90s, from the early thousands. We don't do AOL chat rooms anymore. Zoom is very much popular right now, but even that, think about it. What's after Zoom? There's a calling for all of us to feel that discontent. And I want to invite, this is not just about, I gave the example of technology because that's a very here in our face example. But this is just an example. What's emerging right now is happening in our consciousness. Fundamentally, technology is in consciousness itself. It's not in devices. These are just metaphors. As we grow, I really strongly feel and intuit that it's going to be less about taking stones and metals from the earth. Really, there's so much entitlement in that. it's going to be more about how we vibrate and resonate with the earth. There's a teaching I heard a long time ago that said that the ancients used to keep the stones in the earth because the stones would receive information from the stars, and we would walk on the earth with our feet to receive that cosmic information from the earth. It's so beautiful. And there's a reason why plants and planets sound very similar in their wording. So yeah, I'm only giving technology as an example, but this is not by any means the end game. It's just a moment of our development. Right? So Zoom, what's after Zoom? What's emerging in terms of human beings actually coming together? Right? We have the metaverse, which will continue to allow people to interact with each other across the world, and maybe even in more three-dimensional ways. Or, I saw an example of the metaverse where you can pull up screens in an augmented reality, so you can have not just your computer screen, but multiple screens at the same time. That's cool. Whatever. We'll see what it's all going to be. This is going to happen. It's all a part of it. Don't say it's not. People said the internet wasn't going to happen. All kinds of things weren't going to happen, and they did, and this will. But more will happen beyond that, and it actually isn't, the end game. I always say with Uranus, internet, computers, AI, virtual reality, these are just phases. They're toys of consciousness. They're just touching upon the true nature of the mind that we're just beginning to tap the tapping of the tappings of. There's so much to unlock in terms of who we are. That's why I really value time to be an observer, to look, to witness our lives without story, to see. There's so much value in that. So, what's emerging? What's next? What wants to blossom in our lives? In our business, in our relationships, in how we do work, how we exchange commerce, how we relate to each other as in community. There's a stress for new thinking, for new openness right now. Meet it with an appreciation that the timing here is really, there's a natural calling of us forward, calling us forward to evolve. And often with Uranus, Jeff Green taught that there can be these repeated signals that manifest, seemingly non sequitur. Dream messages, signals or symbols or archetypes that are manifesting. We're not creating them with our conscious mind, they're just manifesting. And to see, what is it pointing, what's beginning to liberate? What is it pointing to within our consciousness that wants to open up? Oftentimes there will come a point where then it's time to actually act upon or integrate these dynamics to understand what the liberation is. And it's very common that this is met with fear and a lot of resistance at first. And eventually it's integrated. So this is a year of profound possibilities for freedom. In the talk with Gemini Bright, I spoke a lot about Saturn square and the nodes. I'll speak more about that in a future video, but with that happening, Saturn in Aquarius and Uranus in the North Node, there's such profound, essential change going on this year. How are we living? How are we relating to each other? Not just philosophically, it's like the calling with this North Node Uranus conjunction is, if we're not living, there's no joy, there's no life. It's not just about survival, it's about living. It's about feeling the fluidity and the joy and the meaning, the value of our lives. We can't just trot on in the old way. So see where this is in your chart. Where is Uranus right now? Where's Venus, the ruler of all of this? This is where these essential changes and evolutions are taking place right now. And where we have the opportunity to just feel into the unfolding journey. If you see that over the next few weeks with Saturn, Mercury moving retrograde. In fact, let me share the screen. I'll show this to you. So here's Mercury up here, just moving forward. This is around the time where Mercury stations direct. Yes, it passes Pluto, so that's its own little thing right there. But it stations direct, and then it goes back into Aquarius by mid-February. So it joins Aquarius again, and it's going to square Uranus by the end of February. And it looks like also at the very end of February, early March, it will join Saturn. 1st of March. So that's an important piece to speak to here. what's emerging right now, the schisms, the confusions, the it's not working, the I feel like there's another way to see this, all that's happening in our lives, there's an upgrade that wants to happen. This is a time period where we're going to see a lot of new insights and developments occurring. I mean, it's so weird. Just in this day alone, I find myself deeply curious to learn more about blockchain. And I'm learning about CSS programming for my WordPress website, making changes on my website, but changes that I can't do with any plugins. I need to make changes with CSS, and I'm actually learning how to do that. Never thought I would do that, but apparently that's giving me the intellectual skills to actually have more creative control to make some of these changes in my website. So there's a lot of learning happening right now, and I just think throughout the rest of this month, and especially February, oh my, radical changes. And it'll be cool to see how this kind of coalesces when Mercury joins Saturn in March. And actually completes, because Mercury was just about to join Saturn when it went retrograde. Look at it right now. Saturn and Mercury are so close. Mercury stationed retrograde just a couple degrees away from Saturn. All right. So lots of powerful creative developments and growth during this time. May it be peaceful and exciting and interesting for us all. Thank you for watching.